Hey guys! This is Miss Michaela here from the Downtown Huntsville Library. Welcome back to Book Connection, where we try to make a connection between adult books and kids' books that cover the same topic. So for today, I have Miss Heather Atkins from the third floor.
Hello.
Welcome, Heather.
Hi.
Would you like to tell them what we're reading about today?
Yes, since it's so close to that time, we are choosing books that focus on voting for the most part, I think.
Yes.
Yes. So this was a fun run. Lots of books out there.
So many.
So many.
So Heather, as bringer of our adult books and our special guest for today, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Sounds great. So like I said, I chose books on voting and a little more foundational about our democracy as well. Large span of options in nonfiction. So I chose things that were largely nonpartisan, mostly informational. If you're interested in something that has a partisan leaning, there's a million books that we also have. Just look in the online catalog and you'll find them. But here's what I brought. Our first one is Democracy in One Book or Less: How It Works, Why It Doesn't, and Why Fixing It is Easier Than You Think by David Litt. Basically, his point is that democracy is a moving, changing target. And he talks about the founding concepts and compares them to today's reality and generally just how we got where we are, how we got here. He covers a wide variety of topics, and honestly, he has one of the most readable descriptions of the evolution of the Electoral College that I've ever come across. So I would almost suggest this book on that chapter alone. But otherwise, I like this book because it's a little sarcastic. He is a bit of a comedic writer, so he has a bit of a dry wit. But it's really well, it's really well sourced though. So he has like the information and the facts to back up his sarcasm. So that's that one. Our second book is Our Time Is Now by Stacey Abrams. This is a bit of a tougher book to get through. It's very readable, but it talks about voter suppression and our country's history of voter suppression and how it's changed over time and the iterations it's gone through. The author offers a game plan of how to combat voter suppression, and she actually tests a lot of her theories in her gubernatorial campaign from a couple of years ago in Georgia. So it's semi-autobiographical, but it's supported by a lot of case studies, several of which are actually from Alabama. Hello, local connection. It's very readable. It's conversational in tone, so it's not like you're getting hit over the head with statistics, but you're still getting a bunch of factual information in there as well.
I enjoy a conversational read over statistics.
Right. It's very hard just to read straight statistical books. So these are very, it's like you're having a conversation with them. Both of them are. It's great. This is the one book I chose that is not a recent publication, and it is by far the most visually appealing of the ones I chose.
It's a very appealing blue.
A very lovely blue, partly faded by the sun. Has been on our shelf probably for years. Anyway, it was published roughly over 200 years ago. Yeah.
She's in good shape.
Very good shape. This is the Federalist Papers by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, three of our founding fathers for the United States. This kind of falls under the category of should be required reading in grade school, but probably isn't. Like, you probably read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and you studied those in social studies, but you may not have hit the Federalist Papers. Cliff notes. It's basically what these three founding fathers said. We need to convince people to get on board with the Constitution, so we're going to write 85 essays to convince people to get on board with the Constitution. This is exactly what a minute and a half worth of a song in Hamilton is about. It's basically when Hamilton knocks on Aaron Burr's door in the middle of the night, and he's just like, you're an amazing lawyer, and you're awesome, and please help me support this, and we're writing papers. It's, quote, a series of essays anonymously published defending the document to the public. That is what this is. Essay 68 specifically has to do with the Electoral College, and a few surrounding that. I want to say 67 and a few of the early 70 ones have to do with its relationship to the executive branch. All of those are written by Alexander Hamilton, by the way. So you look at this and you're like, Alexander Hamilton wrote most of these essays? Well, I wonder who really figured out the foundation for our democracy.
That is intense.
It is. It is intense.
My favorite essayist is Samantha Irby, so I don't think that book is for me, honestly. I wish I could say that it was, but it's not.
Yeah. But speaking of books that may not be for you,
yes.
If you're not really into like general history or just reading like straight up essays, that is what this book is for. I loved this book. It's called Math with Bad Drawings, Illuminating the Ideas that Shape Our Reality by Ben Orlin. It was my favorite book pick of this group. And you know what? Despite it being a math textbook, like math is not my favorite anything. Like I do not like math, but I loved this book. So I chose it because, again, one of the chapters focused on explaining the Electoral College. And he does a really great job of talking about the formation and the function, and specifically about how the different states' relationships with voting, because it's probably a common belief that voting is pretty level across all the states, when it's actually really not. A lot of states can have their own voting laws, and he talks a little bit about those relationships. You know it's a good book when another book uses its illustrations. So the illustrations in this are happy little graphs and stick figures. And some of these graphs and stick figures actually show up in David Litt's book as he explains the Electoral College. I enjoyed it. Anyway, if you're not interested in the Electoral College, this book also covers such things as the chaos of history and an oral history of the Death Star, which is on my to-do list for reading that chapter. But those are the books I chose.
You're so dedicated.
I tried. These are all great. You can check these 3 out of the library. This is a reference book, but it's also in public domain, so you can find it almost anywhere on the internet, the Federalist Papers. Yep.
That was really interesting. You had me up until the Federalist Papers, but you won me back with the math book.
The math
you really
book.
Did.
Yeah.
That essay book, though.
Yeah. Not for the faint of heart is that one. This is one of those books where you can read a couple essays and put it down and then pick it up and read a couple more. So it's not as bad if you take it like in little chunks.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Just read it like a short story.
Just read it like a short story.
Okay.
There you go. What you got?
So, for the kids section, I'm going to start off with the hardest book. I'm going to say hardest. It's a teen book, and I would recommend it for teen readers. Hardest because it was very upsetting to read, honestly. The title is We Are Not Yet Equal, Understanding Our Racial Divide by Carol Anderson with Tanya Bolden. The author starts off from the Civil War up until, I think the Black Lives Matter movement, but just talking about inequalities in voting and inequalities in all walks of the United States, pretty much. I wanted to focus on it because it does talk about the fight for the right to vote that African Americans underwent and how hard that struggle was. And it's a very hard read, honestly. I spent the whole time just angry. I had to read it in bits and pieces, kind of like I would have to do with the Federalist Papers. Would recommend to teens or adults because it does provide a lot of information, but again, it's upsetting, but it's the truth. So the next book, which is maybe this much more lighthearted, is Roses and Radicals, the epic story of how American women won the right to vote. It's by Susan Zimmett. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I really hope. But this I would recommend for middle grade readers. Upper elementary to middle grade, probably. And And just like the title says, it is the story of the women's movement for the right to vote. The author does focus in on the good that they did, but also the not so good that they did. For instance, they left out African Americans and people of color in general when they were fighting for their right to vote. The author does a good job of pointing that out. So the flaws are there and the values are there. In general, I found it to be a really good read. It's not as infuriating, nowhere near as infuriating as this one. It's a much safer read, I would say. Let's leave it at that. And with the figures that were left out in this book, my next one is Because They Marched, the People's Campaign for Voting Rights That Changed America. This was put out on the 50th anniversary of the March from Selma to Montgomery. And just to illustrate the book binding that you get in 2015 versus 200 years, you said?
Well, the book itself isn't 200 years old.
Okay.
It was first published 200 years ago. This was copyright 1961, so...
Okay. So still about it's pretty old compared to this one.
Yeah.
But, you know, the love of it being a reference book rather than a book can
Oh,
be checked out.
goodness.
It's been through some things. It needs some doctoring, but it has a lot of photographs inside that depict people as they were fighting for their right to vote. And I chose these 3 books just because I wanted to make sure that, you know, we're illustrating the point of how important it is to vote. People died for this. But on a much more lighthearted note, because I'm going last, I wanted to present to you The Next President, The Unexpected Beginnings and Unwritten Future of America's Presidents by Kate Messner and Adam Rex. So this book is going to be geared more towards kids that are probably at least at a first grade reading level. So just to show you kind of what it looks like on the inside. It's depicting children that are on a visit. And as you can see, it shows pictures of the White House. See all the president's portraits. And there's a little blurb that goes along through. And it's basically letting kids know that the president could be alive right now. So one of the lines is, when George Washington first became president, there were 9 future presidents already in America. So I enjoyed this book because it does a really good job of illustrating the fact that anyone with, you know, the desire to work towards that office could potentially become president, and also the importance of that office. So if you would like to read more books about voting or elections in the United States, the library actually has a pretty good LibGuide put together by Brian Thess, one of our colleagues, and the link to it will be in the description. And if you are wondering where you can go to vote, just Google it. You can go to thevote.org, several other places. You can just type in your address and then where do I vote, but please get out there and vote. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No. Sounds like a great selection of books.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to see you next time. Bye.